Greetings, Mason Storm here. When you go to the grocery store, there's usually a few items that the young kids working the cash don't know what they are. Napa cabbage is one, fennel is another. Today we're going to be working with fennel. We're going to be making some roasted potato fennel soup, and it's quite delicious. And if you've never worked with fennel before, I'll show you how it's done. So I got a little bit of olive oil here, an onion that I diced up, a potato that I diced up as well, and a couple heads of fennel. I believe they're called heads. Not entirely 100% sure on that, but they do look like them. And here we go, we got the old cutting board out with our fennel. Now the first step is to remove the stalks at the top. So I'm just going to use my blade here and sever them vigorously. Now the stalks, you can use those for other things. You can use the top fuzzy bit as a bit of a garnish, like I'm going to do a little bit later. The stalks can also be used in salads as well as palate cleansers. I'm just going to quickly rinse this off before I do anything further. Now I'm going to cut it in half from tip to stern through the root. So I have 2 even pieces of the fennel. From there I'm going to remove the core of the fennel by doing a V-type incision and then kind of prying it out a little bit. If you're really good on your cut, you can get it to just fall out and look all perfect and natural, but more likely than not you're going to struggle with it a little bit, but just take your time, it'll come out. And once that's removed, that's kind of the big thing with this. This really isn't overly complicated of a vegetable to work with. When you're buying your fennel, try to get nice solid bulbs, ones that aren't really opening up. And if you do have one that has a couple of strands that are kind of opening, you can just kind of discard those. Discard the loose leaves of your fennel. I guess, technically I think they are leaves. I'm not 100% sure on that either. So now we can proceed to do our slicing. Now as far as your slicing goes, you can go either way. You can go top to bottom, side to side. It really doesn't make a huge difference, especially with this recipe. But if you're doing some other recipe, whichever kind of look you want to go for, because it does kind of have layers, almost like an onion, but depending on the direction you cut will change how its overall appearance is. But for this type of soup it really doesn't matter, but generally it's either one direction or the other when you're working with fennel. And once we have this all cut up, it's time to move on to our first real step of the process, which is going to be the roasting process. Our roasting process is going to be quite simple. We're going to get out the old sheet pan. If you don't have a stone one like me, get out the parchment paper, foil, sill mats, whatever you're fancy, and then proceed to dump all your vegetables on top of it. And then we're going to coat everything with oil and throw her in the oven and start the roasting process. If you have a lot of stuff like I do, it's probably better to do a lower temperature roast, that we don't have the top go dry. If you're into it for speed, fire it on convection and you can do it with multiple pans and get everything done really quick. But I wasn't in a hurry, so 350 degrees, left it about an hour or so, and that seemed to be enough time for the potatoes to be tender, which is usually a good surrogate endpoint for determining when your vegetables are ready. And just as a reminder, we're making soup, so we need some more ingredients. So I have a teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of pepper, as well as 1 cup of cream and about 1 liter of broth. Now I wanted to use vegetable broth, didn't have any in stock, so full disclaimer, this is beef broth. You don't have to use beef, you can make this full vegan, fantastic soup. So I got the old cooling tray out here, and I'm going to take my vegetables out and proceed to dump them into a large pot that will be perfect for our soup. Now we'll proceed to add in our broth to our vegetables. This will make it so that we have kind of a liquidy type of concoction. You're aiming for about a submersion level. And we're over at the stove top. We're going to go for a medium heat and then proceed to add in our spices and seasonings and then stir it up a little bit to see what we have to work with, see what our starting point is. The salt and pepper, that's kind of a bit of a guideline. You probably need more, but add a little bit at a time and just kind of see what you got going on. Of course, we've already roasted this, so we might as well make this more consistent of a soup. So I'm going to use the old immersion blender here and proceed to liquefy my soup to make it for a nice smooth consistency. It's one of the great advantages of doing it with the roast style. If you didn't do the roast style, you'd have to do the stew style, in which case you cook it all down until it's nice and tender, then do this. I don't know which is necessarily better. There's benefits to both. Cooking all your vegetables in broth is awesome, but roasting them in oil is also awesome, so there's always a little bit of a trade-off. But as long as we get to a nice, smooth consistency, all the flavors from the fennel will come out into the soup. And the potatoes, they'll thicken it up so that it's a little bit more hearty. Onions bring out flavor as well as some consistency. There's just a lot of great ingredients here coming together to make a fabulous soup. We're not quite done yet. We still have our cream to add, and that's going to act as a bit of a thickening agent. So we get less of vegetable elements in suspension and more of a creamy, delicious soup. And once we get that all kind of blended in, you can kind of let it heat through and kind of warm up. And if you keep cooking it longer, it will thicken up even more, so there's no harm in doing that. But it's definitely a lot quicker making your soup this way than it is to stew everything for like 8 hours. But always trade-offs, right? And that's kind of what we have there. That's our soup. So you just serve this, throw a little bit of the fennel, parsley type leafy stuff on top, and you have yourself a little bit of a garnish, and you're all set and good to go. Taste it, see what your seasoning's like. If it needs more salt or pepper, do so, blend it up a little bit more. Maybe you want a little bit more heat, throw in a little bit of cayenne pepper. All is good. Soup is really a way to be free as human beings. Well, let me know if you've ever had trouble getting fennel in a grocery store before, because I certainly have. And if you like my content, please like and subscribe. And until next time, stay awesome.